Tonight, we travel to the heart of West Africa, where the sun spills gold over endless savannas and the wind hums through dry grasses like an ancient lullaby. Here lies a land once known as Upper Volta, now proudly called Burkina Faso, the land of upright people. You step barefoot on the warm earth, feeling its pulse beneath you, as if the soil itself remembers centuries of triumphs and trials. Before we begin, if this little corner of calm has brought you any comfort, feel free to like the video and subscribe only if it feels genuine to you. No pressure. I'd also love to hear from you. Just drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always special to know we're all quietly gathered here from different corners of the world like a family, scattered but still connected. All right, now go ahead and dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan or a soft hum in the background, something that feels like home. Nestle in, get cozy, and let's ease into tonight's story together. You travel back in time centuries before French flags fluttered in the distance to an era when the Mossi kingdoms stood as proud and powerful entities. These kingdoms, Ouagadougou, Yatenga, and others, stretch across the land like beads on a necklace, each with its own king known as the Moro Naba. You watch the ceremonies at dawn. Drummers beat rhythms that seem to echo the heartbeat of the earth, while warriors in leather and iron sharpen their spears. The Mossi are not just warriors. They are farmers, traders, and diplomats weaving alliances with neighboring states and fiercely defending their autonomy. They never fall easily, not to the Songhai Empire, nor to the Islamic Jihad sweeping across the region, and certainly not to early European explorers poking their noses where they weren't invited. Historians still argue whether the Mossi's resistance stemmed from sheer military might or a cunning network of negotiations. But either way, you sense that spirit still lingers in the air. As centuries flow, you watch caravans move across the dusty Sahel, linking Mossi markets to Timbuktu and beyond. Traders bring salt gold and cloth, while griots, oral historians, sing of ancestors who stood tall against all odds. Their songs slip into your ears like warm honey, reminding you that history here isn't just written in books. It's sung by the fire under a sky pricked with stars. Life is not easy. Droughts bite rival kingdoms, clash, but there is a rhythm of resilience that beats steady like that drum you heard at dawn. Then the 19th century approaches with whispers of danger. On the horizon, new powers lurk, European empires hungry for land and resources. You see maps in faraway Paris being carved with straight lines by men who have never felt this sun on their skin. They call it the scramble for Africa, as if the entire continent were a pie at a dinner table. You can almost hear the sarcastic chuckle of the ancestors watching from the spirit world. They know this land is not so easily taken. Yet the clouds of change darken. Traders notice new faces at their markets. Missionaries arrive speaking of salvation while building schools. The world beyond Burkina Faso presses closer, and so the stage is set. You feel the land bracing itself like a tree rooting deeper before a storm. The Mossi kingdoms, proud and enduring, are about to meet an entirely different kind of challenge, one that will test not just their warriors, but the very soul of the land. As the night air cools and the stars blink awake, you sense history holding its breath, waiting for the next gust of wind that will carry in foreign flags and foreign rules. You stand at the edge of a new century, the 1800s, sliding quietly into the early 1900s when the savannah's calm is pierced by the distant rumble of foreign footsteps. The French, already entrenched in parts of West Africa, now cast their eyes toward this land. You see their soldiers marching in dusty columns, their boots sinking into soil. They barely understand why the shimmering heat distorts the horizon around them. They carry rifles and flags, but also maps drawn with neat lines that cut across villages and kingdoms like a careless blade. To them, this is not Burkina Faso, it is a patch on a quilt they call French West Africa. Historians still argue whether France's expansion here was a deliberate long-term plan or just an opportunistic grab during the chaos of the scramble for Africa. But either way, the outcome is the same. The shadows of foreign flags spread wider and wider. You wander through Ouagadougou and watch how life begins to change under colonial hands. The French demand taxes not in money at first, but in labor. Villagers are forced to build roads and railways that serve not their own communities, but the colonial economy. Crops shift too. Where millet and sorghum once thrived for local needs, cotton fields sprout to feed French industries thousands of miles away. You can almost hear the land sigh under the weight of this new order. The Moro Naba, once the unchallenged heart of Mossi authority, now walks a delicate tightrope, allowed to keep his throne, but only as a ceremonial figure under the watchful eyes of colonial officers. It is like a puppet show where the strings are invisible but strong. Markets change their rhythm. French coins jingle where cowrie shells once whispered. Foreign merchants arrive with goods that glitter but also tie locals to imported needs. You pass through a school where French teachers drill lessons in a language alien to the children, teaching them to see themselves as part of an empire that stretches far beyond their horizons. A strange duality grows on the surface. Life goes on. Farmers farm griots, sing, but beneath a slow erosion of autonomy gnaws at the roots. The French bring not just soldiers but missionaries and administrators who believe they are civilizing the land. You can't help but smirk at the irony how they call it progress, while dismantling traditions older than their own nation. Still, even here the people adapt. Some learn the new language using it as a tool. Others cling fiercely to their customs, whispering resistance through stories and rituals. This quiet defiance flows like an underground river, unseen but unstoppable. Then comes the First World War, far away in Europe but close enough to send ripples here. The French recruit thousands from Upper Volta as soldiers and laborers. You see young men leaving their villages not knowing if they will ever return, their bravery stitched into the fabric of a war that is not theirs. Some come back hardened, carrying new ideas of rights and freedoms. Others never return their names, fading into the wind. After the war, the colonial grip tightens further. The French carve and recarve borders, even dissolving Upper Volta entirely in 1932 to divide it among neighboring colonies as if it were a chess piece. You feel the identity of the land bending but not breaking like a reed in the wind. The Mossi chiefs protest, ordinary people grumble in markets, griots sing songs that remember a time before these maps. Yet the foreign flags still wave. The years tick forward, each one layering more pressure on the people. By the 1940s, as another global war rages, you see new cracks in colonial control. The winds of change are faint now, like the first sigh of harmattan dust, but they are coming. The French do not see it yet, or perhaps they refuse to, but you, standing here with dust on your skin and history in your ears, you can already sense that these chains, however heavy, are not forever. You wander deeper into the 1940s and 1950s, and the colonial chains do not just rattle, they press into daily life like a constant ache. You drift through a village at dawn where women balance water pots on their heads, men sharpen tools for the fields, and children run barefoot over dry earth. The sun rises hot and unrelenting, yet what weighs heavier than the heat is the presence of French authority that lingers like an invisible overseer. You see the tax collectors coming, not with smiles but with ledgers and demands, forcing payments that drive families into hardship. The head tax, the crop, quotas, the relentless obligation to serve the colonial machine, each one a thread weaving into the suffocating fabric of control. You watch villagers barter with what little they have, only to see much of it siphoned away to feed the distant appetites of an empire. You walk through the markets, once vibrant with local produce and crafts, now increasingly dictated by colonial trade patterns. Cotton bales stack high, destined for ships that will never return the wealth they take. The French administrators enforce policies that force farmers to prioritize export crops, leaving local food supplies vulnerable. Hunger quietly creeps into homes, and you can almost hear the unspoken frustration, soft grumbles at first, like the rumble of an approaching storm. Historians still argue whether the economic burdens imposed by the French were purely exploitative or if they unintentionally laid infrastructure that later supported independence. But standing here, you feel the answer tilting heavily toward exploitation. The colonial presence reaches even into faith and identity. Mission schools grow teaching French language and Christian doctrine, while often dismissing traditional beliefs as superstition. You see a young boy repeating French phrases he doesn't understand, his eyes betraying a longing for the stories of his ancestors told by the evening fire. Yet these schools also sow unintended seeds. Some of these children grow into the very leaders and thinkers who will later challenge the colonial order. It's one of history's ironies: in trying to reshape minds, the French nurture the tools of their own undoing. Meanwhile, forced labor continues to build roads, railways, and administrative buildings. You hear the hammers, the creak of wooden carts, the labored breaths of men who have no choice. Some work far from their homes, returning months later to find their fields overgrown and families struggling. Others never return at all. These roads, shiny symbols of progress, also carry away the wealth of the land, transporting resources to ports where ships wait like hungry vultures. The people endure, but resentment simmers quietly beneath their stoic faces. You notice how the mossy chiefs, once powerful, are caught in a trap. Some collaborate to protect their positions, others resist, subtly shielding their people where they can. The Moro Naba still performs his grand ceremonies draped in traditional robes, his court gathered in splendor, yet you can sense the power hollowed out beneath the surface like a tree eaten by termites. The French use these traditional structures as tools of indirect rule, twisting old hierarchies into colonial ones. Still, even in this distortion, cultural pride survives. The songs, the dances, the rituals, they whisper that identity cannot be erased so easily. Then there is the war, World War II, where again young men from Upper Volta are sent far beyond their borders to fight for France. Some return with medals, others with scars, and many with stories of a world bigger than the one the colonizers allow them to see. They bring back whispers of freedom, of nations rising, of movements spreading across Africa and beyond. It's as if every returning soldier carries a spark in his heart, a spark that will one day ignite something unstoppable. By the late 1940s, these sparks begin to catch. You pass through the capital, where new faces union student groups emerging. Political voices start to gather, not yet shouting but speaking firmly. They question the taxes, the forced labor, the lack of representation. They write petitions, organize small protests, and spread ideas that sound radical to colonial ears, but perfectly reasonable to anyone who believes in dignity. The French, distracted by rebuilding after the war, underestimate this growing undercurrent. You smile slightly, knowing that even the smallest current can carve canyons over time. Night falls on the savannah, and the stars scatter across the sky like tiny, watchful eyes. Beneath their glow, you feel the people of this land holding tight to who they are, despite everything. The chains are still there, yes, but they are beginning to loosen thread by thread as a new era edges closer. You can almost hear the earth itself whisper, "Change is coming." You move forward into the 1950s, where the air seems charged with something new, like the moments before a storm finally breaks. The villages you wander through still bear the marks of colonial control roads built with forced hands, markets dictated by French policy, but the conversations have changed. You catch them in the quiet corners of courtyards, in the shade of baobab trees, in the crowded hum of city cafes, talk of rights, of autonomy, of a future not chained to Paris. These whispers gather momentum, spreading like dry grass catching flame. The seeds of resistance are not planted by one person alone. They sprout from everywhere, at once watered by decades of frustration and the first rays of hope. The unions grow restless. Workers begin to realize the power they hold when they stand together. You see railway workers putting down their tools, demanding fair treatment. You hear teachers and clerks speaking of equality, of the right to have their own voices in governance. It's not just anger, it's awakening. Students too take up the cause. They read about movements in Ghana, where Kwame Nkrumah's voice booms across Africa, calling for freedom. They hear of leaders in Guinea, Senegal, Ivory Coast, neighbors daring to question colonial chains. The ideas are contagious. Historians still argue whether these unions and student movements were the true engines of independence or simply part of a wider global tide. But standing here among them, you feel their energy like a drumbeat in the chest. Political parties emerge tentative at first, then bolder. The Voltaic Democratic Union UDV begins to organize, giving shape to the growing unrest. Meetings are held in secret or sometimes brazenly in public squares where fiery speeches challenge the authority of colonial administrators. You can almost see the French officials stiffening their control, slipping through their fingers like dry sand. They respond with concessions, small reforms, half-hearted gestures, trying to placate the rising tide. But once people taste even a hint of possibility, they want more, always more. In rural areas, resistance takes quieter forms. Farmers deliberately slow their work on colonial projects, keeping the best seeds for themselves. Women, often overlooked in official narratives, continue to preserve cultural traditions and pass down stories that remind the next generation who they are. You notice that while the French impose their systems, they cannot erase the heartbeat of the land. It thrums in ceremonies, in the pounding of drums at night, in the way elders speak of ancestors who never bowed to anyone. The world beyond Upper Volta is shifting too. Across Africa, independence movements surge like a tidal wave. Ghana becomes the first sub-Saharan African country to break free in 1957, and its triumph sends shockwaves across the continent. You see young activists in Upper Volta listening to Nkrumah's speeches on crackling radios, their eyes alight with belief that they too can stand tall. The French, facing uprisings in Algeria and unrest in their colonies, begin to loosen their grip, not out of kindness but out of necessity. You pass through Ouagadougou in the late 1950s and the city feels different. Posters appear on walls, rallies draw crowds, people speak openly of independence. The French tricolour still flies, but it flutters uneasily now as if it knows its days are numbered. Negotiations begin, not always smooth, not without tension, but steadily moving toward a new horizon. Leaders like Maurice Yameogo step forward, navigating the delicate dance between asserting freedom and managing the expectations of a colonial power reluctant to let go. You sense that history is tipping slowly but surely toward a point of no return. As the decade closes, the atmosphere is electric. The French authorities, perhaps realizing they cannot stem this tide, begin to prepare for withdrawal. The people prepare too, not with fear, but with cautious excitement, knowing that freedom is not a gift, but a fight. You feel the chains, long and heavy, starting to snap one by one. The stars overhead seem brighter, as if they too are watching this land, ready itself to reclaim its name, its dignity, and its future. You step into the dawn of the 1960s, and it is as if the whole of West Africa is breathing in at once, holding that breath and waiting for the exhale of freedom. Across the continent, flags of colonial powers are being lowered one by one, replaced by the vibrant colors of new nations. You ride this wave of Pan-African energy, feeling it sweep through towns and villages of Upper Volta. The voices of leaders like Ghana's Nkrumah and Guinea's Sékou Touré ripple across borders, stirring hearts with the belief that Africa belongs to Africans. Even radios with crackling signals carry this message of change into the most remote corners, and you can almost see the sparks in the eyes of young listeners. The streets of Ouagadougou buzz louder than ever. Political meetings are no longer whispers in the dark. They spill into the open air, filled with energy and the smell of dust, kicked up by hundreds of feet. Songs of freedom blend with drum beats, creating an anthem of resilience that rises over rooftops. Historians still argue whether it was the strength of local activism or the broader context of decolonization and French political exhaustion that tipped the balance. But here on the ground, the answer feels simple. The people themselves carried this movement forward with stubborn dignity. You watch as the political climate heats up. Parties jockey for influence, alliances shift, and debates rage over what independence should look like. The Voltaic Democratic Union pushes hard for autonomy, and leaders like Maurice Yameogo rise quickly in prominence. You see Yameogo traveling, speaking, building bridges with both traditional chiefs and modern activists. Some admire his charisma, others whisper doubts about his motives, but all agree he is a figure who will shape the next chapter. Meanwhile, the French sense the inevitable. Their grip loosens not out of benevolence, but because they face resistance everywhere. Algeria burns with revolt, and across Africa, colonies demand self-rule. France offers reforms, grants more local governance, but the people of Upper Volta are no longer satisfied with crumbs. They want the full loaf. Negotiations unfold and you feel the tension, like the taut string of a bow. Each meeting, each concession is a step closer to independence, yet also a reminder of how fragile this process is. Beyond politics, there is a cultural renaissance. Artists, writers, and musicians begin to express a renewed pride in Voltaic identity. You pass through a gathering where griots sing not just of ancient kings, but of a future where the people decide their destiny. Traditional drums mix with new instruments, and the rhythm is infectious. Even under the shadow of colonial buildings, there is a sense that something deeply African is rising, refusing to be silenced. As 1958 rolls around, France proposes its community plan, offering colonies a kind of halfway house autonomy under continued French influence. Guinea famously rejects it outright, declaring full independence, while others weigh the risks. In Upper Volta, debates rage. Some fear economic collapse without French support. Others argue that true freedom is worth any price. The decision is not simple, but the tide is clear. By 1959, preparations for independence move into full swing. The winds of change, once whispers, now roar through the savannah. And then the day comes, August 5th, 1960. You stand in a square where thousands gather, the air thick with anticipation and the scent of dust and sweat. The French flag lowers slowly, almost reluctantly, and the new flag of Upper Volta rises against a brilliant sky. The crowd erupts in cheers, tears streak faces, drums thunder, and for a moment history feels tangible in the air you breathe. Yameogo stands at the center of it all, declaring the nation free. The joy is overwhelming. Even the old colonial buildings seem to glow in the golden light, as if acknowledging the dawn of a new era. You smile, but you also sense what lies ahead. Independence is not an end, it is a beginning, and beginnings are rarely easy. The people celebrate, but deep down they know the challenges waiting: building an economy, defining governance, protecting culture, and navigating the lingering shadows of foreign influence. Still tonight, under a sky exploding with stars, the land of upright people takes its first steps into freedom, unshackled at last. The celebrations of August 5, 1960 fade into the rhythms of daily life, and you soon realize that the glow of independence, while bright, is not everlasting. The young nation, now proudly called the Republic of Upper Volta, steps onto the world stage with head held high, yet the path ahead is rocky and strewn with old shadows. You stroll through Ouagadougou in the weeks after independence and notice the lingering presence of French advisors in government offices, French businesses in the markets, and French influence woven into the very fabric of the economy. Independence has been won, yes, but neo-colonial threads still tug quietly at the nation's sleeves. Maurice Yameogo, now the first president, takes the reins with confidence. You watch him wave to crowds promising progress and unity, his voice steady, as he speaks of modernizing agriculture, building infrastructure, and carving a place for Upper Volta in the global community. For a while, the energy is infectious, roads are extended, schools are built, and the country seeks partnerships beyond its former colonial master. Historians still argue whether Yameogo was a visionary trying to steer a fragile state towards stability or an opportunist clinging to power. But in these early years, the optimism is palpable. Yet beneath the hopeful surface, the challenges loom large. The economy remains tied to French markets, dependent on exports like cotton that fluctuate with global prices. You visit rural areas where farmers, despite independence, still struggle with low incomes and erratic rains. Infrastructure grows but slowly, and inequality gnaws at the edges of society. You see the frustration in the eyes of villagers who wonder if this freedom is truly changing their lives. Political cracks begin to show too. Yameogo consolidates power-limiting opposition parties and clamping down on dissent. The democratic hopes of independence give way to a single-party state where loyalty is prized over criticism. You overhear murmurs in markets, whispered complaints in the shade of mango trees, as people begin to feel that the promises of independence are slipping through their fingers. The government, leaning heavily on French aid, struggles to assert genuine autonomy. Even as French troops leave, their economic and cultural influence lingers like perfume that refuses to fade. Meanwhile, the region itself is turbulent. Across West Africa, newly independent nations wrestle with similar problems: fragile economies, power struggles, and the heavy shadow of Cold War politics. You sense the pressure on Upper Volta to pick sides in a world divided between East and West. The country leans toward France and the Western Bloc, avoiding the radical socialist experiments of some neighbors, but this choice also keeps it tethered to old dependencies. As the 1960s progress, discontent brews. Teachers strike, students protest, unions rally against economic hardships and government corruption. You watch as crowds gather, waving banners, chanting for better wages, more rights, real change. The police respond with force, and you feel the tension in the air crackle like the build-up before a storm. Yameogo, once the face of independence, now faces a growing wall of opposition. By 1966, the storm breaks. A mass uprising erupts, led by unions and fueled by widespread frustration. With austerity measures and political repression, you see thousands march through the streets, their chants rising like thunder. The military steps in not to crush the people, but to remove Yameogo, ending his rule in a swift coup. The president flees, and General Sangoulé Lamizana takes power, promising to restore order and guide the country toward stability. The celebrations this time are more muted, tinged with caution. The people have learned that freedom is not just about removing a flag, it is about holding leaders accountable again and again. As night falls, you sit by a quiet fire in a rural village. Elders talk softly of the old days, children listen wide-eyed, and somewhere a drum beats slowly, steadily. Independence was not a single day in 1960, it is an ongoing struggle. A long walk through shadows toward the light. You can feel that walk continuing step by step, even now. You drift into the late 1960s and 1970s, and the mood in Upper Volta feels different, less like the heady air of celebration and more like a heavy cloak of uncertainty. You walk along the dusty roads of Ouagadougou, where posters of new leaders replace the old, yet the faces of ordinary people remain weary. The country, though free on paper, is caught in cycles of instability that seem to play on repeat like a scratched record. The army, once seen as a protector of the people, becomes an ever-present force in politics, stepping in whenever civilian governments falter. You can almost hear the echo of boots against concrete as power changes hands behind closed doors. General Sangoulé Lamizana, who seized power in 1966, now rules with promises of reform. You see him balancing precariously between military control and civilian aspirations, attempting to craft a constitution that pleases everyone and offends no one. Historians still argue whether Lamizana's long tenure brought stability or merely postponed deeper reforms, but you watch him struggle through droughts, economic crises, and growing unrest. His government seeks aid from France and international donors, weaving new dependencies even as it claims sovereignty. There's that irony again: freedom always comes with strings, and those strings are hard to cut. You wander into rural areas where the hardships bite hardest. The 1970s bring devastating droughts to the Sahel, and you see crops wither, rivers shrink, and cattle skeletons bleaching under the sun. Families migrate in search of food, their footsteps tracing paths of survival across barren lands. Relief trucks arrive from abroad, but they are never enough, and the people whisper about a government that seems distant from their suffering. You can almost taste the dust in the air, bitter and dry, as the land itself seems to cry out for change. Back in the cities, unions and students continue to agitate. They protest austerity measures, corruption, and the lack of opportunities. You watch demonstrations flare up, sometimes met with tear gas, sometimes with silence. The political scene is a carousel. Constitutions are drafted and suspended, governments rise and fall, and hope flickers like a candle, struggling against the wind. Lamizana eventually allows multi-party elections in the late 1970s, a move celebrated by some, but distrusted by others who suspect the military will never truly loosen its grip. Internationally, the Cold War hums in the background, its invisible hands shaping African politics. The United States and the Soviet Union compete for influence, while France maintains its special relationship with Upper Volta, offering aid but also quietly ensuring that the country remains within its orbit. You see foreign advisors in suits, development plans rolled out like blueprints, and loans piling up like unseen chains. It's the era of modernization programs that promise much but often deliver little to those who need it most. As the 1980s approach, the economic strain deepens. Inflation rises, food insecurity persists, and the government struggles to meet the expectations of a young population increasingly aware of global currents of change. You pass groups of students huddled around radios, listening to news of revolutions in other parts of the world. Their faces alight with the belief that something more radical might be possible here too. They speak of justice, equality, and the need for leaders who truly serve the people. Then in 1980, another coup erupts. Lamizana is overthrown by Colonel Saye Zerbo, who promises a new dawn but delivers more of the same repression, economic hardship, and the banning of unions. Disillusionment spreads like wildfire. 2 years later, Zerbo himself is toppled by Major Jean-Baptiste Ouedraogo. Yet again, the cycle turns, promising reforms that never fully bloom. The nation feels trapped in an endless loop, each change in leadership more cosmetic than transformative. You sigh as you watch the Burkina people endure these storms with quiet strength. They protest, they survive, they wait. You feel the tension building, the sense that something more profound, something fiery and uncontainable is stirring just beneath the surface. The old ways of doing politics are fraying, and a new voice, not yet on the stage but already gathering power, is preparing to speak. The wind shifts, carrying with it the faint scent of revolution. The year is 1983, and the wind you felt earlier now roars into a storm. You walk the streets of Ouagadougou as soldiers move with purpose, their uniforms dusty, yet their eyes blazing with determination. Amid this tension emerges a young Captain Thomas Sankara, whose voice cuts through the noise like a clarion call. You watch as he climbs to power through a coup, not with empty promises, but with a fiery conviction that electrifies the air. Sankara is not like the leaders before him. He speaks plainly, wears simple clothes, and rides a bicycle through the city, shunning the pomp and luxury that so many politicians embrace. You can't help but smirk. This man clearly enjoys breaking expectations. Sankara's first act is symbolic, yet profound. He renames Upper Volta to Burkina Faso, the land of upright people. You feel the name settle over the country like a blessing, a declaration that dignity is not just a word, but a way of living. Historians still argue whether Sankara was a pragmatic socialist or an idealist, doomed to clash with powerful interests, but in this moment his vision burns bright. He launches bold reforms that ripple through every corner of society. Land redistribution empowers farmers, vaccination campaigns sweep through villages, and education programs bring books and teachers to places long ignored. You see children learning to read under mango trees, mothers attending health clinics for the first time, and farmers celebrating as they keep the fruits of their labor. Sankara's government wages war on corruption and waste. Ministers trade luxury cars for modest Renaults. Public officials are banned from extravagant perks. You watch him give speeches where he openly mocks the arrogance of the elite, earning cheers from the poor and grumbles from those who benefited from the old order. He promotes women's rights, a move revolutionary in this society. You see women taking leadership roles, joining the army, and speaking out in public spaces with a confidence that feels new. Traditionalists frown, but Sankara stands firm, saying, "No revolution is complete without the liberation of women." Internationally, he challenges the status quo, refusing to bow to foreign powers or debt collectors. At summits, he denounces neocolonialism with a fiery tone, calling for African nations to stand united against exploitation. You can almost hear the nervous coughs of Western diplomats when he speaks, for Sankara does not play the game of politeness. He calls out the hypocrisy of aid that comes with strings attached, saying Burkina Faso will stand on its own feet, even if it means sacrifice. His speeches are sharp, witty, and often laced with humor, once quipping that he prefers to plant trees rather than beg for aid. You chuckle softly. This man is fearless, maybe even to a fault. Under Sankara, environmental policies take root too. He launches massive reforestation campaigns, urging every citizen to plant trees to combat desertification. You walk through villages where young trees sprout green against the brown soil, each one a small rebellion against the encroaching Sahara. He also champions local production, encouraging people to wear locally made clothes and eat locally grown food. The imported suits and foreign luxuries that once filled government offices vanish, replaced by woven cotton and simple meals. It feels like the country is reclaiming itself inch by inch. Yet not everyone is thrilled. Sankara's radical policies and refusal to bow to global financial institutions make powerful enemies both inside and outside Burkina Faso. Some elites grumble over lost privileges, neighboring leaders eye his boldness with suspicion, and foreign interests quietly scheme against him. His reforms, while popular among the masses, ruffle too many feathers at once. You can sense the storm clouds gathering even as his movement flourishes. In the streets, however, the people adore him. Children sing his name, women cheer his policies, and farmers praise his efforts to break free from the chains of dependence. The atmosphere feels alive, like a festival of possibility. You see murals of Sankara painted on walls, slogans of self-reliance written in bold colors, and a country that for the first time in decades walks with its head held high. Night falls and the city glows softly under lanterns. You watch Sankara sitting among ordinary citizens, eating from the same bowl, laughing easily. He is both a leader and a brother to his people, and you can feel why they believe in him so fiercely. Still in the shadows, the whispers of conspiracy grow louder. The dream he is building is fragile, and the forces arrayed against him are vast. For now, though, under the stars of Burkina Faso, hope burns brighter than fear. You move through the streets of Ouagadougou in October 1987, and the air is thick, heavier than usual, as if the city itself senses that something is about to shatter. For 4 years, Thomas Sankara's fiery leadership has transformed Burkina Faso, challenging corruption, defying international powers, and empowering the people. Yet even as he inspires devotion, he also provokes resentment. You overhear whispers in dimly lit cafes, in military barracks, in foreign embassies. He has gone too far too fast. His uncompromising stance against foreign debt rattles international creditors. His crackdown on corruption humiliates entrenched elites. His revolutionary zeal unsettles allies and adversaries alike. Historians still argue whether Sankara's fall was inevitable due to these forces or the tragic result of betrayal by those closest to him, but you feel the tension building like a bowstring pulled to its breaking point. On October 15, 1987, the breaking point comes. You hear gunfire ripping through the stillness of an afternoon. Soldiers loyal to Blaise Compaoré, Sankara's trusted friend and second in command, storm the presidential compound. The gunshots echo through the city, each one a punctuation mark ending an extraordinary chapter. Sankara is killed in the coup. His body quickly buried, his name banned from official discourse. For a moment it feels as if the dream itself has been buried with him. You wander the streets that night and see fear glinting in people's eyes, their voices hushed, their steps quick. The land of upright people mourns in silence. Blaise Compaoré takes power, calling the coup a rectification of Sankara's revolution. You hear his speeches promising continuity, but the tone is different, softer, toward foreign powers, more palatable, to those Sankara once defied. Under Compaoré, many of Sankara's reforms are rolled back, privatization creeps in, and foreign aid flows more freely, tethering the nation once again to external interests. The radical independence that Sankara championed fades into a more conventional, controlled governance. You watch foreign investors return, old elites reclaim their influence, and the revolutionary murals begin to peel under the sun. Yet the people do not forget. In the markets, in hushed conversations, in secret gatherings, Sankara's name is spoken with reverence. His speeches circulate underground, recorded on tapes, shared like forbidden treasures. You hear mothers telling their children about a leader who walked among them, who believed they could stand tall without begging. Students copy his quotes into notebooks. Activists wear discreet pins bearing his image, and musicians write songs that carry his spirit in coded lyrics. Sankara becomes not just a man, but a legend, an idea too strong to be erased. The 1990s and 2000s pass under Compaoré's long rule, 27 years of political maneuvering, repression of dissent, and economic policies that keep the country stable yet unequal. You see protests flare now and then, quickly subdued. International observers describe Burkina Faso as calm, but you know it is the stillness of a surface hiding deep currents. The rural poor remain poor, urban youth grow restless, and a quiet longing for justice simmers just beneath the ordinary routines of life. By the 2010s, the pressure builds once more. The memory of Sankara has grown, not diminished. He stands as a moral compass in the hearts of the people, a symbol of what was and what could be again. In 2014, when Compaoré tries to extend his rule, the people rise up. You watch as hundreds of thousands flood the streets, waving signs, chanting, demanding an end to decades of stagnation. The protests swell into a tidal wave, and this time the military does not suppress them. Compaoré flees, ending an era of tight control. In the chants of the protesters, you hear Sankara's name, shouted openly at last, carried like a torch through the crowds. Night falls, and the stars over Burkina Faso seem to shine brighter, as if they too remember the dream that Sankara died for. His assassination was meant to silence him, but it only amplified his voice across generations. You realize that while leaders may fall, the ideals they ignite can burn forever. The land of upright people continues to walk bruised but unbowed, carrying that flame through the dark. You drift gently into the years after 2014, where the spirit of the Burkinabe people once again rises to shape their own future. The fall of Compaoré is not the end of the struggle, only the turning of another page. You walk the streets of Ouagadougou as jubilant crowds celebrate his departure, waving flags and singing songs that mix grief and hope. Yet even amid celebration, the questions hang heavy in the air. Who will lead now, and how will this country finally break free from the cycles that have haunted it for decades? The transition is fragile, marked by temporary governments and the careful rebuilding of democratic institutions. You hear debates in parliament, fiery speeches in public squares, and as always, the persistent hum of ordinary life continuing through it all. Sankara's legacy becomes more than memory, it becomes a guide. Activists and young politicians openly invoke his name, drawing inspiration from his ideals of self-reliance, social justice, and dignity. Murals of his face reappear boldly on walls, no longer hidden in alleys but displayed proudly. Historians still argue whether the modern leaders who praise Sankara truly follow his vision or simply borrow his image, but among the people, his name is a rallying cry. You see young protesters carrying placards bearing his words, and farmers planting trees in his honor, continuing his fight against desertification, one sapling at a time. The country faces new challenges. Terrorism spills over from neighboring conflicts, particularly in Mali. Climate change tightens its grip on the fragile Sahel, and political instability continues to test the resilience of its institutions. You travel to rural villages where fear of attacks has displaced families, and to urban markets where prices rise faster than wages. The hardships are real, but so is the will to endure. Burkina Faso remains poor by global standards, Yet its people still stand with that same upright spirit that gave the nation its name. In recent years, coups have returned. 2022 brings not one but two military takeovers justified by leaders as responses to insecurity and ineffective governance. You watch soldiers address the nation on television promising to protect the people and restore order. Some citizens welcome the change, tired of endless instability. Others fear history repeating itself. The pattern feels familiar, like a song playing again, but the lyrics are changing. This time the people are louder, more aware, unwilling to let their voices fade into silence. They continue to demand accountability, to protest when needed, to push for a better future, no matter how many obstacles arise. Through all of this, Sankara's ghost walks quietly beside you, not in mourning, but in defiance. His grave, once unmarked and neglected, is now a site of pilgrimage. People come to lay flowers, whisper prayers, and renew their vow to build the country he dreamed of. His speeches, recorded decades ago, still play on radios and in classrooms, stirring hearts with the same intensity they did in the 1980s. You realize that the dream of freedom is not tied to one man. It lives in the millions who continue to carry his ideals forward. You stand now in a square at dusk, watching children chase each other as the sky glows orange and purple. Their laughter rises above the sounds of motorbikes and distant drums. This is Burkina Faso, not perfect, not free of struggle, but unbroken. The people walk tall, facing whatever storms come their way, with a strength rooted deep in history. The chains of colonialism are gone, yet challenges remain. Still, the spirit of the land of upright people holds steady, refusing to bend. The night settles around you, soft and warm, and the city hums with quiet life. In the flicker of lanterns, in the songs drifting from doorways, in the pride etched on every face, you see the truth. Freedom is not a destination, but a journey. And this journey, though long and winding, continues with each step forward. Now, as the final notes of this story fade into the night, let yourself settle deeper into the calm. The heat of the day softens, and the sounds of Burkina Faso, the rustle of dry grass, the distant beat of a drum, the hum of voices, become a gentle lullaby wrapping around you. You've walked through centuries, through kingdoms and colonies, through coups and revolutions, and now you can rest, knowing that the people of this land still walk on with pride. Breathe slowly. Feel the rise and fall of your chest like the slow rhythm of the savanna winds. Each breath washes away the weight of the conflicts, leaving only the warmth of the stories that connect us across time. You've seen bravery in warriors who defended their homes, wisdom in leaders who stood against giants, and hope in generations who never let their dreams fade. That hope glows faintly now, like embers in the dark, comforting and steady. Let your thoughts drift with those embers, floating above the quiet city, above the villages, above the endless stars shining on Burkina Faso. The night is peaceful here, and so are you. There's no rush, no noise, only this shared silence and the knowledge that history, like life, is full of both storms and calm skies. As your eyes grow heavier, let the spirit of the land of upright people cradle you. Imagine walking once more through its fields, feeling the earth beneath your feet, hearing the laughter of children in the distance, and knowing that the journey continues even while you rest. Good night, traveler. The story sleeps with you now, safe and warm.